Good. All right. All the meeting over. Mr. Boone, you have re-indicated.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for being with us today. Thank you, Lord, for giving us our life. Father God, I ask you to be with us in this meeting, dear Lord. Give us the wisdom and understanding to make better decisions or even great decisions for our town. Father, I ask you to be with each and every one of us in here, to just bless us and keep us. Please another blessing back into
Please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic and one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? No, ma'am. I hear approved.
Maybe I should be through the agenda.
Sorry. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, like sign. And the agenda is approved. Consent agenda. Yep. Good. No, we don't have to do anything again. Right. All right, Mr. Manager, carry on.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Jennifer's going to pass around a copy of tonight's PowerPoint. You'll see that most of the material tonight is really a recap of the previous meeting we had, and there was an addition of conversations around the police system. So we'll roll through the first part of this presentation pretty quickly, if there are any questions. Everybody got time? Right. We're gonna put it on the screen, or we can go ahead and hang back?
Yes, we are going to put it on this.
Okay. This is repeating some of the same information, but I know it's been a little while since we talked about it. We'll make sure we're all on the same page. It's a lot of numbers, a lot of facts for mentioned in a short period of time. And make sure we all walk away with the same understanding of the theory. So. So we're here, go over budget as required by North Carolina General Statutes. Y'all know our four major funds, again, general fund, Cowbill fund, water and sewer fund, and our license plate agency. We've been working on the budget process in December. And we've already submitted their estimated budget to my office, or our budget office. Budget team, including myself and Ms. Johnson sat down, as part of the day, whatever their estimates for operating capital. We researched the file support revenue data for FY24, the revenue projection. Staff has reviewed those findings, the timeline for the quickly next slide, and gave guidance guidance, working with each you, based on the strategic plan we presented in May. So tonight, this is going back to our timeline for meetings. We have had the first three meetings in the left column, and we're here at May 9. And this was what we mentioned originally as tentative. This is our final budget workshop session. So May 15th, it's expectations we're going to come out here with a complete budget, at least an agreement on where we're headed. Because May 15th, we're going to be presenting the budget. The budget message from the town manager that we will share with the public at our board meeting Monday night. Then we'll have our budget public hearing. Commissioner Hagus requested we separated that out and do 5, which is our first scheduled regular board meeting in June. And then recapping our priorities, as you know, we adopted five major priorities. Differently from our last presentation, we want to make sure you had a copy of the complete strategic plan. So on this slide and the next slide, you'll see not only the five priorities, but the individualized goals under it. All we've done is copy that from my strategic plan, but I want you to have that as a reference as we go through this plan. Debt service, we talked about this at the last meeting. From where we stand right now, we're in excellent shape on debt service. Now, flip side of that is, as the town is about to experience significant growth, debt service is one of the fundamental ways in which we have to address that, because we don't have the proceeds to address all the needs that we're going to have. We're going to provide the level of service to meet the expectations for the county population. But in a positive note, you're in a great position to be able to make those decisions now, because you've been very good stewards of the money when it comes to the debt service. So you see in the general fund, only $158,156 in principal, around $20,000 in interest. So that's excellent. You also see the biggest chunk of that, over half, is scheduled 6, and equipment payment 4. So that debt will be paid off in the current budget. So you'll see the general fund debt cut in half. And then you see on the utility fund side, we do have some more debt there. You see the water meter project beginning. We're about 2/3 of the way through our reservoir pump payments. We're early on in the water treatment plant, with one payment 2 of 10, and then also part of schedule 6. We also have debt this coming year, around $65,000 there. So excellent shape there. Just a reminder, these are our general fund budgets, our departments, excuse me. It is most of the town. It's everything that you generally think of outside of water and sewage, LPA and power, all up into one fund. Means you're generally operating this off of collections of property taxes, sales tax, permits and fee collections, and miscellaneous revenues. So we have a lot of different operations that are town being funded by just a few revenue sources. So a few highlights, a reminder from our very first meeting, we talked about capital. We do have around $40,000 in the budget for replacing computers. That's something we're trying to make sure that we're prioritizing. We've been behind on that. That will be something we do annually. We have 444 in the budget. Those are dedicated to the police department. We discussed that. F-550 with the 12-foot dump bed and snow plow. That's going to be divided between this fund and water and sewer. We do that along with the bulk of the attachment, the excavator. Stormwater program. Eventually that will be big enough to be its own fund. But we're starting it out in the public works department in the general fund. Biggest purchasing that we're looking for next year is the leaf truck. And y'all seen, we took some pictures and had a live demo of that leaf truck. If you want to know more about that, I'm happy to share this. Guys in public works are really excited to see that piece of equipment in operation. We are looking to dedicate the majority of our capital funding to paving. That's something that is a great concern to ADJOURNMENT and something we're trying to prioritize. So we are working on having a paving plan going forward. Personnel, employee cost of living, we're trying to stay competitive with our peers in Chatham County and Pittsburgh. And knowing what they're doing, we're looking at the cost of living increase at 7%. We did a great job when it comes to renegotiating our employee insurance we discussed. And working with our superintendents, our water and wastewater plant, our utility director, we agreed to 2 new positions, one in each of the water plant and wastewater plant starting in January. They're going to need more, but that's where we're going to start as we find additional revenues coming in. On general fund department breakdown. You saw this slide at the last presentation. I just wanted to highlight for you a few changes that took place in our last meeting. In the finance department, that number has been reduced a little bit because we moved some more money out of the finance department to 660, which is the non-departmental budget. We've also, let's see. We've also increased the planning department budget based on our conversation at the last record meeting, of having a point on planner one with a senior planner. We had to increase the salary line item there. And buildings and grounds has also increased because we've had to move items from other budgets. We want to make sure that going forward that departments are charging things effectively to their departments, not trying to reach into other designated departments. We want to make sure that Cal is ultimately responsible for what's going on in all of our buildings and grounds across the town. Next slide. Stormwater, you see an increase there. I believe we talked about the leaf truck being around 250,000. Quote we got was around 275, so we didn't bump that number up. It won't require any changes from what we have discussed from that revenue source. We need to make that adjustment to the budget. We moved some money from Parks and Rec as well as non-departmental and the airport. And we made a correction to the debt service, because we didn't have that number calculated correctly at the last meeting. So when you're looking at the total budget for our revenue side, we got to make sure that our revenues and expenditures balance out, because we're required more time to always have to balance the budget. So you're looking at your major revenue sources, property taxes and sales tax are roughly about the same as last year. And both of them make up around 40%, roughly 40% apiece, and your others about 20%. So we're in a very healthy position when it comes to sales tax. And Chatham County, remember sales tax is distributed on a countywide basis. Chatham County has the largest increase in sales tax across the whole state. So we're very fortunate to reap the benefits of that. Next slide. Capital fund. So this is the street aid program for North Carolina to fund the services in municipal streets. So now we're in our 2020. This is based on miles of street as well as town population, and it's divided 50-50. We get an allocation around October, and we get another allocation around January. So in the past, this fund has been used to cover expenses associated with street maintenance. We're really trying to work to get the street maintenance piece out of the capital budget and move it back in the streets. So the more we can move out there, the better job we can do with going back to paving the resurface of the streets. I know that's something you're going to get asked a lot about. And make sure that we're doing the best we can with the resources about it to do that. So here's a breakdown on the capital budget. It kind of speaks for itself. We're really trying to prioritize the paving and resurfacing, so it takes up the bulk of what's funded there. We also commit funds. Our second largest line item is for sidewalk repairs, and that's something that calculates a lot about that they work on going forward. Other line items are pretty comparable to where we've been in previous years. All right, now we're in the 30 fund. So this is just as large as our general fund, but this few departments because it's such a costly operation. So one of the things we did change, you'll see those in meeting. So we added a 500 department for buildings and grounds, which is the same as for the general fund. Same logic behind that. We want to make sure that buildings and grounds are appropriately allocated instead of just based on regular operations of a particular division. We want to make sure that it's pulled out. Capital expenses, water and sewer fund. So you'll see this is very similar to what you saw on the general fund. First three items were the same. But we did add an F-150 and a lawnmower for the 30 fund. Debt service, you see increases from the water meter projects we have on the previous slide, and also the active flow project. We are recommending the same personnel standards as we did with the general fund, and trying to make sure that all of them begin alignment with our. So a few changes from our previous meeting, and it's the same as what we talked about in the general fund. We put more of these departments, 60, non-departmental, because we felt that was the best allocation for it. We want to make sure that we're charging things appropriately where the cost is really served, because we're trying to identify where costs are increasing. We want to make sure they're allocated. So a lot of work is going behind the scenes with the staff, making sure we're readdressing and changing code for our chart of accounts. We have much better, more accurate records going forward, where revenues are coming in and how expenditures are looking at. And we also have a new line item there at the bottom, transfer to projects. So what is that? We're looking at funding for capital projects. As you know, we talked about around 30 capital projects we've got. It's very important that we start setting money aside, because not only we have to fund these projects, even when we go after grants, most of the grants are far lower than that. We've got to start making sure that we're in the ballgame. It would be really unfortunate for us to lose out on opportunities to make improvements to our system and not having have a local match on the grants. You'll see this is a little bit higher. Water and sewer fund in the general fund. Now $10.2 million, $5 million for water, $4.8 million for sewer, and then $343,000 in other revenues. You can see, although it's a lot of money, in both of those funds, generally water and sewer, the bulk of the funding for Siler City comes from just a few line items, so it's very critical that we get them. Just like the general fund, it all has to balance. So the LPA, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the LPA, but it's an important service that we provide to the residents of Siler City, and it's a service that we're one of very, just a few places that have that as a part of the town of the service. So this is only broken out into two departments, the license plate agency and then non-departmental. So highlights for the LPA. These expenses are for the contract service that we have with the North Carolina Department of Transportation Division of Motor Vehicles. To be consistent, we also recommended the same personnel changes for that fund. And in the two departments that are part of the LPA fund, you'll see that their budgets have increased slightly, but nothing significant. Biggest change is we now have 3 people operating in the LPA full time. I know in the past it's been 2 people, it's been 2 and then a couple part-time people. We started the beginning of the current this year operating 3 full-time people, and that seems to be the solution that works the best. So I think we're providing a good quality service to our residents by providing in that format. The flip side of that is this is a fund, it should stand alone. We do not have control over what the fees are charged. The union tells us what we're allowed to charge when it comes to revenue, and it doesn't completely fund itself. So I wanted to let you know that this is an important service we provide to the public, but it is not entirely self-sufficient. It is, to some extent, funded through general fund dollars, so around $35,000 subsidized through general fund. Okay. So now we're getting a little bit more newer material. Any questions before we go on and discuss the fee or what we've gone over so far? Okay. So on the fee schedule, that's the bulk of our meeting tonight. And it's not a lot of material. We don't have a lot of recommended changes. The LGC recommends local governments setting utility rates to ensure utilities run like a business with reasonable rates. North Carolina general statutes require local government utilities stand alone and be independent of the general fund. What does that mean? We need to make sure that that fund is not appropriating funds from the general fund to make it operate. You need to be bringing in enough revenue from each of those funds to be able to operate without assistance from the other. There are 2 totally different revenue sources, and the state is expecting us to operate in different. General fund, we're providing generalized services across the town. When we're talking about a water and sewer fund, that's an enterprise fund or a proprietary fund. What does that mean? It means it runs like a business. It's supposed to show a profit because you need to have funds set aside for projects and ongoing infrastructure needs. So local grants for capital project grants should be funded through the water and sewer fund. That's something we emphasized a minute ago. I think it's critical that we start showing that we're setting some money aside to do that. How long has it been since we've talked utility rates? Well, that's not a fun conversation, but it's important. Like the project we've got coming down the pipe, we gotta make sure we have revenues to cover those expenses. So it's been since July 2016 that utility rates have changed in Siler City, which is 7 years. When they, doing a little bit of history, when they changed in July of 16, that was based on a 3-year implementation in the past. So when the rates were adjusted, we were really basing that rate off of information that was 3 years old. Because rates increased, the rate increase was based in thirds over 3 different years. So the town was behind even in July 2016 addressing the issue. And since 16, we've seen some significant inflation across the country, and our operations are no different. Curtis, I know you know all about the cost of operations of a wastewater plant. And it's hit Siler City pretty hard, just like it hit everybody. This is a framework reference. Inflation since July 2016, when last rate was done, to now is 25.44%. And we have not seen significant growth in our residential population since July 2016. The flip side of that is your staff is trying to find a way to operate with 25.44% increased cost providing the same service, and it's not sustainable. So it's something we're going to have to look at coming this next year. So, Freeze and Nichols presented to you a preliminary water and sewer rate increase taking effect in the current year. Additionally, staff reviewed increased preliminary numbers due to the number of current capital projects, operational expense increases outside of the preliminary numbers. They will come back on July 1st with recommendations for all utility fees, including additional rate increases, system development fees, and surcharges. Freeze and Nichols, as you know, have to break each of these things out as different components because different reports take different amounts of time to complete, and they're trying to provide you the information and close to real time as possible so it has come out in stages. But when we get to the system development piece, just be aware that there is a public hearing requirement based on general statute. We can slow things down if we need to on this slide. This is what we're looking at for water-based rates and sewer-based rates. And you see there's several different columns there. And they're meant to line up. So when you see current rate per month, that is the best what we charge per month. And then that's escalated for every 1,000 gallons that's charged to the customer. So when we say residential inside, that means a residential property inside the town limits of Siler City. Vice versa, residential outside would be double the rates. And to those we provide water and sewer service to that are not within the town limits of Siler City. Commercial inside will be all our businesses, a business community in Siler City in the town limits. Commercial outside would be businesses outside of the town limits we provide water and sewer service for. And we also offer an industrial rate, which currently we only have one customer that is charged that industrial rate, and that is for those using around 15 million gallons a month when it comes to their base rate. So they have a slight reduction there. So those are our major tiers when it comes to water and sewer. And you can see in the proposed rate per month what the increase would be per month that's proposed. So you can see it speaks for itself, but this is what we felt was the bare minimum of what was needed to get where we need to be. Because we're trying to play catch up with inflation. You got a recommendation from Freeze that told us that we've got $400 million in water and sewer capital projects that we're going to need to address. And then we're also got ongoing infrastructure needs, additional personnel issues that need to be addressed. And it's something that we're gonna need to revisit annually. So a concern that I have that I'm sharing with you is that as a consequence of waiting since July 16, it is a larger increase, 25%. We're seeing GFL going up on their rate around 3% a year. I think it would be prudent when you're talking about a business fund, if you would try to mirror something like GFL is doing and look at 3 to 4% per year. I think it would minimize the impact to residents. It wouldn't be such a dramatic effect. And I think we can also do a better job educating the public of why this cost is coming. And we can provide you talking points so that we get deeper in the process, so that we can help educate the public and get questions about it. But I do think not only will that help us not lessen the impact of residents, but each of those increases are significant every year. If we wait 7 years for an increase, there's 7 years of revenue that 3% could have funded the project during that time that we're missing out on.
You don't want to do consumption. That was base.
So consumption is what we're referencing when we're talking about our escalation of rates based generally on a 1,000-gallon increase. So this would be the impact that you would see as a result of that. And trying to address the rates to be as consistent as possible. Although the industrial rate is overall less per gallon, we're trying to do the same percentage increase for industrial as we do with commercial to be consistent. Any questions? So we asked all of our department heads to go through their fee schedules for their departments and recommend any changes. So instead of presenting a detailed breakdown of all of the fees that you've seen many times before, we just want to point out the ones that are changing. We just do. The utilities department has asked the pre-treatment yearly administration fee go from $100 to $120. And the septic hauler yearly administration, where we currently do not charge a fee, they're recommending a fee of $60 for the next year project. That's solid waste. So solid waste is a service that we provide every resident, but it's contracted out to GFL. Our contract states that they have a right to escalate their costs based on the cost of living increase, and that includes 3% for our contract for next year. We also discussed in previous work session adding the addition of a flat curb waste pickup fee, because we can be more proactive when it comes to bulk items we see left out on the road. And then stormwater. Charles Archer, Freeze Nichols, made a presentation to you regarding the stormwater utility fee and the runoff that creates in Siler City. The panels charge the stormwater based on what's called an equivalent residential unit, which assumes an assumption is made that all residential property is one ERU. So you're measuring the commercial industrial property, 3,100 square feet of impervious surface. That creates an ERU. So if the property is 6,200 square feet, you would say that they have 2 ERUs, and they would charge the $5 per ERU rate of $10. So in year one, we expect to generate revenue to purchase a leaf truck, and then we'll start doing small projects throughout the town. So I expect this will be something that will dramatically increase as time goes on, but it gives us the opportunity to be more proactive when trying to provide this important service to the public. And as we continue to develop, we get the residential population, we grow our business, we're going to have more impervious surface. And when we have more impervious surface, it's going to create more stormwater issues. So getting ahead of it now is a really smart, proactive plan. Because once we wait till we get a lot of development, it's going to be really playing country. So we're estimating this note $1 per month ERU is going to bring in around $92,676. As this program grows, it may even be able to stand alone as its own fund. Because by statute, stormwater is listed as an enterprise. So it cannot, it is actually intended to run like a business, just like water and sewer, as in solid waste. So as we grow, many towns will eventually break that out. It's something we can consider. So those are the highlights for the budget. A lot of the stuff that you've seen before, but we've included some changes from our last meeting. We discussed the few changes that there are. How many of the water and sewer further changes? What questions are there from the board? Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, right now, average water bill, in the water bill, they get water to the water connection plant is somewhere, I think, $77 per customer. Average customer.
Right.
Okay, with that being said, average customer, proposed budget, what's gonna be the average they'll be paying with all the new stuff, the new fee schedule, new fees and everything.
Right. So what we're looking at, and we're looking at percentage increase of about the same, inside, outside, it's just double, whichever way you go with that. For water, we're looking at a residential, around 17% increase. Commercials around 22. And that's for water and sewer, around 30 for water, residential sewers around 30, and sewer commercial around 7.
Is that dollar or percentage? Well, what does that relate to in dollars? That's what we're going to get asked when they get that first water.
47% increase,
I'm sorry.
so it's a 47% increase.
No, not exactly, because it's 20% on one rate and 17% on another, so, I mean, you can't add them together and then multiply it. But it's about, what Freeze presented was about $46 for 4,000 gallons. So for an average household, but we will definitely have all those bullet points, ready for you to answer questions. We're planning on having those for you on Monday.
So the newest water bill from now will be an increase over this month, $46 with all the different fees and everything. New fee schedule and the new fee, $46.
That's right. I just think it's hard to think in like.
Well, I know, I didn't, wait, I just need to know some kind of figure. That's pretty big. No,
It is, but as we use these numbers, 17%, 22%, it's in line with what we're also looking at when it comes to inflation.
yeah.
So that's part of our issue is that we're essentially playing catch up, but not addressing inflation for 7 years.
Yeah. Well, and I understand the percentage thing, but the question, the citizens are not gonna ask, why did the percentage that go up? Why did my water bill go up $46? That, you know, you can talk about all that stuff, that's what they're gonna say, that's what's gonna hit them in the fire, that's the question we're gonna ask.
And we wanted to get through tonight, to get consensus from the board that this is the direction we're going, so that we can give you some hard talking points that you can go around and share with people. So we want to make sure you got accurate information, because the last thing you want to do on something like this is inaccurate data to the public. We will have it for you. But I think this emphasizes the need that when we talk about water and sewer rates, or any type of rate that we're passed on to us, the importance of looking at it on an annual basis, because it makes the conversation that you have to have with the public a lot harder by waiting 7 years.
Well, if you can get those talking points to us as soon as you can, that'd be great, because we are gonna have this conversation, and I do agree that if we'd have taken small bites of this elephant each year, we wouldn't have quite as much to talk about now. And we've also, as you point out, we've lost out on the potential for capital improvements because we haven't.
And just a reminder, we talked about this before, but part of the mechanism that comes to receiving grant funds is what are your current charging fees. So the last thing you want to do is miss out on grants from the state because state deems it's not recharging the rate appropriate. Let that be.
Well, 46, no, I'm still in the city. Folks on fixed income and stuff, that's a great big jump. I mean, that's a great, especially if you take it to the factory and what the average yearly income. For a lot of the citizens here is 48, 49,000. Very big. I'm just pointing that out, since we've got a considerable amount of senior citizens, different ones, and all 15 coming, you know, like a whole lot. Maybe that's it, a lot of folks, that ain't gonna make the break. There's only some that's gonna convert.
He's right, I agree. The challenge of water and sewer is difficult for everyone, it's not a fun conversation for anybody. That I would say is different from the general fund. A lot of your general fund discussions around priorities. How much police service do we want? How much parks and rec do we want to provide? How much funding do we want to commit to that as a service? And those are balances that we have to make. We value all these things, but what is it we feel like we can afford? Then the taxpayers are asking us to put that forward. Water and sewer is business. It's something that we're obligated, that we're taking on responsibility, and the state gives us to say, we're gonna operate this as a business and make a profit. And if we can't do that, the state's gonna send us letters and say, maybe you need to consider joining another town or joining authority because you're not making a profit. You're not being able to provide the service that's necessary to keep up with that enterprise.
We got those letters, when I first started, we got two years, 2 in a row. For the state threatened to come over and take our operation because we were not.
Charging enough.
We weren't charging enough, we were dipping in general fund, we weren't running the business, we weren't profitable. And, we got some nasty grants from Raleigh.
That's right. And unfortunately, there's no service that we provide that's more expensive than water and sewer, and it's not getting any cheaper. Just what it would have cost us a few years ago is a fraction of what it is today. But one thing we do know, the more we delay capital projects, the more we delay fixing our infrastructure, the more expensive it's going to get. It's not going to get any cheaper. It's just an inevitability.
Another question I had, or it's gonna relate to the fees and everything. In the budget, current budget proposal, are we putting any money back into the general fund?
Are you asking, are we putting funds aside for fund balance?
Yeah,
So there are not any funds budgeted to go to fund balance. But that's different. What normally happens is you develop a budget, you pass it, you go through the operations, and any funding that's left over at the end of the year is allocated to fund balance. So you're making an allocation to fund balance every single year, just based on whatever is left over from all your department operation.
I thought we had, didn't we do something one time where we put a certain percentage into it?
We did at that point, but that was because our fund balance was so low relative to our expenditures. We needed to get it up to a certain point, and then we got told, because we did that, that our fund balance exceeds the amount.
The recommended price.
That's a good way up.
Yep, we did.
We did, so we held that line for several years to get it up, and then we had a discussion that we would start looking at, a capital improvements fund instead of a general fund balance fund.
That's right. That's the ways that's typically addressed. One, you just let whatever proceeds left over at the end of the year roll into fund balance. It's all got to go somewhere. When budget year closes out at midnight on June 30th, whatever remaining in revenues goes towards general fund, fund balance. Some towns have policies, and we do too. When we adopted our financial policy several months back, we agreed upon setting a fund balance policy. So the reason you do that is, once you're at your target level of fund balance, then you have conversations of what is the appropriate use of fund balance? Does money set aside for funding large capital projects? A lot of towns will say funds that are left over, that would roll into fund balance, instead of doing that, if you're at your appropriate fund balance level, you may say, okay, if we have 200,000 left over, we'll apply that to existing debt service. Then you can reduce interest payments and then there's a few different philosophies on that. The LGC is going to recommend that you have at least 8% of fund balance, and that's a rough number because it's around a month of operations. Now, the bigger you are as an organization, the lower that percentage is going to be, just because of the amount of cash that potentially you could have on hand. Now, around our size, you like to see a number much higher than that. So anything in the 40, 35 to 40% range is a good healthy number for town size of Siler City.
And we're in that range, we are.
The challenge that we face, and something to consider, is that as we're growing, you can see that number go down as a consequence of having to spend money to grow. That's not a bad thing, because you're also going to receive revenue.
We'll get that, right.
So you don't want to chain yourself to a fund balance number where sometimes they look at it and say, we want to keep fund balance, but then you go out and borrow money instead of using fund balance and paying more than you would have if you just use funds you have on reserve. So it's a balancing act, and it's where we got to measure progress. What is it we feel comfortable with having it set fund balance at? But generally, 35 to 40% of unassigned fund balance is a pretty healthy number for a general side.
Well, and, the reason I even brought that up, was we did a lot of hard work to get the fund balance stuff, what it is. Yeah, like Louis said earlier, it got down low, done a lot of work, hard work to get it to that sacrifice. So I hate to see us get back into that, and it's sort of, here's something sort of worried me. When we start saying, well, at the end of the year, we got some left, and we'll stick it in there, like that. Well, I've been around enough state and local budgets, and somehow magically, by June 31st, you spend everything in the budget. There's usually not a whole lot left, that kind of thing. So that worries me just a little.
I'm not going to speak for previous administrations, but I can say what we're doing now is middle of May, we're pretty well spent. Anything that's left over will not be spent. But I think it's special approval to do that. One, to just that, make sure that we're not spending every dime in the budget. So we can review the budget, make sure the department has been managing the money. If you're waiting until June to spend money, that's a different conversation. Why are we waiting? And it also gives us a chance to make sure that we're appropriately budgeted. If we over budget, we need too much money out there. Maybe we need to do some different allocations or using them. So there's a further process that we go through for that. It's my understanding from the past that the concern about fund balance going down was a result of what we talked about earlier. Fund balance going full to address water and sewer. And the consequence of that, avoiding a rate increase led to pulling funds from fund balance. Because unfortunately, sludge removal doesn't go away. Cost of chemicals to run the water and wastewater plant don't go away. The daily parts of your operation you have to address. We don't have the rates to cover it. Fund balance is kind of the general set aside pot of money to pull from. That's where you lose money. And that's how almost every town goes broke. That's what happens. Fund balance pulls the water and sewer.
And if you're doing that, you're not operating within the statute, you're not operating properly.
That's correct.
And then you get those money from Raleigh.
They take it.
And then Raleigh comes and sets your rates,
Exactly.
which is what was threatened last time. That's why we went on a 3-year step increase, because we knew if Raleigh came in, it would have been 3 or 4 times as much, and the citizens wouldn't have been able to bear it.
And the rules are stricter now. I mean, we'll get someone to Raleigh to meet with Sharon Edmondson, we have the evidence, along with state treasurer, and we'll have a very nice meeting, and the town, it'll damage the reputation of the town. And ultimately, the authority of the LGC, you can ask, the general question, why do you care? The reason you care is in North Carolina, unlike other states, we can't borrow money of any significant sum unless the LGC gives us permission to do so. And we know we've got a lot of projects that require more funds than we have on hand. So if the LGC feels we're not responsible, they can shut us down. You can't borrow money, it's gonna be very difficult to run a town on private road.
You know, they took over Ashland just a few years ago, didn't
So that was a political process where Asheville was in conflict with Buncombe County. So they separated who had authority in certain cities, but the LGC has stepped into other communities. Spring Lake is a very prominent example, where they have stepped in on multiple occasions and basically taking the authority of the board, and the LGC is running the town. They may have a town manager and board, but they're essentially figureheads. They can't do anything unless the LGC says so. We certainly don't ever put ourselves in that position. And it will stay that way until the LGC signs off on the town being allowed to run. Oh, no.
they? What time is
And that's all. Well, it's the consequence of not being proactive in the presentation. Once you pay your fund balance, once you deplete your unrestricted net assets in your water and sewer fund, you can't flip the switch and make those dollars back up. It takes years and years of diligence, and we don't want to ever go down that road.
And one last question, was the stipend for the commission, that it been adjusted?
It is not in the budget, and that's a conversation that we would have to have, because according to our charter, any effect on the salary of the commissioners or the mayor can't take effect until after the election.
I'm personally okay with not receiving an increase.
Exactly.
I mean, we're asking the citizens to come out of pocket on the water, we'll have to come out of pocket on water. I'm okay with
Might
that.
be, or, you know, if you put the 7% on that, like you did everything else.
Now, I figured the board, I let the board make that recommendation. That was something we wanted to do.
I'm okay with not increasing.
Any questions about the budget at all at this point?
Yes, I think you guys have to look at it.
So much spread the last. So from a staffing standpoint, we're looking at the same staffing numbers as the current year. But I would point out that there's an assumption that we have sergeant and four patrol officers on every shift, and the police department has never had that many people. So our goal for next year would be for the first time getting completely fully staffed. And we've made significant progress in that direction during the current year. Being down 1,000 officers, getting that down by 2/3, that's a significant headway. We're getting people better trained, we're getting aside from that. Once we get patrol fully staffed, we still got a whole shift work to go for 4 officers. Once we get that done, then we might be able to move 2 of our experienced officers to the investigative roles. Use their experience there, and we'll have to fill their slots. I believe that's going to take all of next fiscal year to accomplish, because the typical turnover rate for police officers is now 2 years. So we can't assume that we'll keep every single officer that we have on that for the next year, because past history says that will be the case, no matter how much we try to follow. It is so competitive for police officers right now. All people with presented opportunities, we have to be honest about that. But we've also done a lot to address the competitive through our pay study, and also what we recommend in the upcoming budget, so that we mitigate that impact. Sergeant Mark Gonzalez is going to be retiring in the next month, so he's currently serving on top of the evidence position. So our expectation is to change that to a civilian position that's supported by our members of the police department, I think it eliminates the conflict of interest, of having a sworn officer, having direct access to evidence. That's been an issue, but as a best practice, it's good to have stability in that position, so it's sworn officer. That would also provide us additional coverage that we discussed to the front. The police department, when customers come in seeking service, so we have coverage in the front. And then beyond that, I think we'll have to address it on a case-by-case basis. As issues arise, we'll make you aware of them and address it as necessary. We got 4 vehicles in the budget for next year for PD, so that's 4 explorers. So our hope is to be able to move some of the older vehicles from the police department to other departments, because their fleet is in much better shape than other departments. So we believe we have to extend life in some other areas, so we're going to try and improve the fleet on them as well. We try and standardize for different 50s and explorers to get away from the Durangos that are being discontinued, the Chargers are being discontinued as well on forward. We have to make some operational changes there.
Okay, what about the time, like, holding all day, all night? It's when I was up there.
So I'm not sure I understand. So we're not proposing to make any changes in the law. So when we look at what other communities are doing, 8 to 5 is very typical down our size. We currently don't have dispatch service, don't have any intention of bringing that back. So having 8 to 5 hours is what I would recommend. I think you want to find all around the state, and we do have so if someone can use emergency services, we do have a phone, so and we provide 24 hours. So there's always somehow without control. We never get we got down where we only had 2 people working the shift, and that's pretty far. Potentially someone has to go to Pittsburgh, or potentially both officers go to Pittsburgh, leaving holes in the schedule where another year. We don't have that situation. So we're providing better service in the police department now to the town really under the water law.
Is even at night, there's somebody in, you just can't get in the lobby, there's somebody in the building.
So that's going to fluctuate. There are times that there are people in the building, and there's times that there isn't. And the goal certainly be once you get everything staffed, you don't start to supervise the shift with 4 officers. So yeah, I think you can see it in the office. But we're not going to guarantee you someone holds the building. Depends on what the call volume is, what's happening at any given time.
Well, the conversation that I keep getting concerning Mr. Austin is talking about is, somebody that, say they have a PPD when somebody's stalking them or they're chasing them or whatever they're doing. Anyway, that person that feels safe, feels threatened, and they come to the PD to, feel safe, or, to alert somebody. And, when they can't get in, that takes that safety factor away. Something that, we've talked about this before, is a possibility could help some. One is to have some better lighting when it gets dark out here, because it's dark out there. And the other thing too is having some kind of, alarm system or buzzer or something. That's the reason I asked the question, if there's somebody in the building that rather than pick up the phone and you're sitting there, trying to get somebody, they're sitting there ringing, somebody be doing whatever out there. And if there was some way to more quickly get somebody's attention, that may help it. Like you should throw some stuff out there.
On the lighting, I will say there's an antenna on the front glass of the police department. So even though it may look dark, the lights are fairly bright in that bottom, but when you're standing on the outside of the building, it looks like it's been over there.
Well, I'm thinking about this general parking area outside of the whole building right there in the front. I mean, there's some light, it's not really that bright, especially at night. And, yeah, the more light you have, you know, studies, several different studies over the years have shown that the brighter it is, the less likely to have crime activity and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would help alleviate some. Yeah, I understand about the heavy tent on the window. I'm talking about outside. If somebody can see, you can see them from a distance. Somebody riding by can see them or something.
Any other budget related questions?
You said you got 2 officers to put in investigation, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about the other 2? There was 4.
That's correct. So while we're trying to manage our budget and he is responsible as we possibly can with what we think are likely scenarios for filling positions. 2 of those explorers went forward with the kind of fund next year coming from 2 detective positions. Because Chief Wagner and I believe it's going to be very unlikely for us to be able to fill 4 detective positions in 1 fiscal year. We think it's much more likely to fill 2, because that's assuming we filled every office we've never been able to do. So it would allow us to revisit that and decide what we want to do in FY25. But I don't think it's unlikely, it's very unlikely to fill those positions. And therefore we have over $100,000 in funds tied up that we wouldn't be able to spend, that we could use to put towards a necessary need for vehicles. Because if we're adding these officers, we don't have a vehicle supply to cover it. But it is something that Chief Wagner and I discussed and agreed on.
So how about adding the 3 officers per year? Not gonna do that this year either.
No, I said at the last meeting, that's the first I'd ever heard of that. And, you know, when that was brought up, that is not recommended in this budget. Along the same line, if we haven't been in the those positions we already have, adding 3 more is just gonna make it that much, limit us that much more when it comes to the budget, have funds tied up that we can't spend, because they're set aside for personnel. And we're looking at now, we have to fill, we hire 4 patrol officers, then we slide 2 detectives up from patrol. Now you gotta hire 2 more. That's 6 patrol officers in 1 year, after you've gone on a year, you fill 8. And then you're talking about 2 more detectives. I just think that's power on. When you're also considering the fact that's assuming not a single police officer. That just doesn't, past history just doesn't show.
We do want to hire into a contract or something, stay in so many years.
That is correct. Those that we've hired that gone through the kids program, we do have a contract with them, but frankly, it's almost break that what we have held over them is not significant enough that we could really win it. We really be able to hold that. We can withhold leave if they recruit, and there's some options, but we can't prohibit somebody from considering other employment. And at that point, I think you have a hostage situation of guy employee who doesn't want to work for you. It's made that clear. You're trying to hold it back. And I'm not sure what kind of for the productivity is, you know. It's same thing now. There's nothing we can bind their hands, their tied and their hands on them. We can put someone completely through the recruit program. They finish the recruit program day 1, they started an officer for us to choose. Very mercenary. There's nothing we can do to stop them. But I think the way we have to address it is make sure we're staying in constant contact with the recruits that we hire, emphasize the importance of the goals, the mission, the power of the police department, and make sure they feel appreciated from day 1. And I think Chief Wagner and staff have really tried to emphasize that. the program's worked very well so far. There's no guarantee, you know. I think that's why you got a recommendation on personnel for the cost of living increase next year, so we're doing the best we can to stay competitive. So, employees are not looking to work 30 years career for you anymore. They're looking to see what the next opportunity is. And if that's not with you, if you're not meeting what they feel they need, they're gonna leave. Cost of living in Chatham County is not what it used to be. So they're having to make business decisions for themselves. They got families to support, houses, cars to pay for, and if someone can offer them significant pay increase, they're gonna consider it. That's just reality. So,
I don't think the sheriff department and police department work together.
well, they have to. They have to because the sheriff department serves all of Chatham, and we for the full government solid.
Anyway, I heard from the president, the man, 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're not. It was communicated, yeah.
So that's an ongoing process. You're never gonna say master communication, it's something that we don't have a problem with. It's something that we constantly have to work with. The dispatchers on, make sure that they're communicating with us when we have situations. As y'all know, we had a situation here, we were going to go about the thread that went out about potential school shooting that went out across several states and tied into Jordan Athens as well. Every time we have a situation like that, it gives us a chance to reevaluate where we are with communication and say, what have we done right, what have we done wrong? How can we work with the resource office, work with the sheriff's office to better respond and adapt to all life situations. So that's an ongoing process. And I think today was a good reflection of that. You know, Police Memorial Program, the Addison and Pittsburgh. Really the one time a year that you see our chief, sheriff, and Pittsburgh chief together on stage and collaborating when it comes to law enforcement. And I think recognizing that during Police Memorial Week is a productive thing. I think it builds lines of communications and trust that we need them. So we're going to be dependent on each other. When we do get more on there at the beginning, there's a very part of that process as well. I'm curious of this building, so we need to work in tandem with it.
You gotta go ahead and mute.
No.
Oh, one thing, it's got nothing to do with the budget. You see that mess that's on the side of the road in Martin Luther King up there next to your church? Is y'all, do y'all see that?
Martin King Board.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a part of the chief told about it. Is that the one?
It was a house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a house back in text and yes.
Yeah.
Asking about it. And so, today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that?
You know, that is done
Yeah.
when I came through. Work.
Yeah, he come through this, like, you know, it's very good.
Then he said that the little church.
Yeah. That was a bunch of stuff. It looked like somebody done did it scattered it out. Yeah.
That's all on the agenda, correct?
Yeah.
So, it is, just a couple other notes I want to make you aware of, we discussed. It came to Parks and Rec, situation with the pool at the last meeting. So, from where we stood when we talked last week, we had 2 lifeguards, 2 gate attendants, and no swimming instructors and pool managers. So, I want to commend Nancy, Darden and HR, she really worked hard this week to try and address that. In a week, we've gone 2 lifeguards.
How many do we need for the
So
city?
as many as we can get it.
What's the minimum that we need to open on 31st?
We have that.
Okay, what about, so we got a minimum lifeguards, what about the minimum number of gate personnel?
So we had to, we still have to, but we have 8 pending interviews.
So how many do we need to open?
Gate attendant can be flexible, so we'll have coverage either way.
What about, are there any other positions besides the 12 that we would need to fill or open on the 31st?
The critical part is the lifeguard,
Wow.
that's what's got to be certified. Right. We can find ways to provide coverage to the other. I think we have full-time staff. But if no one doesn't pass that certification exam, you know that in lifeguard. That's correct. So that's where we put our emphasis. It is a certification they have to get, we're paying for that.
Do we have, has anybody gotten to the level of being a certified instructor so they can give the lifeguard class?
So, Jack Clellan and Tyler Stinson both are certified as instructors, but Jack's leaving us. So we're looking to utilize Tyler as an instructor. And we already have that scheduled,
So we're gonna start offering the classes here.
to start with, no, but what we're gonna do is, there's already a class that's already scheduled, out of the county, and they've allowed us, if we were willing to co-teach it with Tyler, they increased the capacity by 81%. So it's gonna allow us to get our people involved in that. Because those spots are filling up. So by us co-teaching, it's allowing us to expand the.
So we're co-teaching with the county this summer.
Yeah.
And then next year we'll teach it ourselves.
That's correct.
So this year we're splitting the revenue with the county for those classes.
I don't know that part.
Like if,
I mean,
if,
sorry, like, you reckon that's an instructor?
yeah, so, well, if John Dunn wants to get a lifeguard certification, and we've got a certified instructor that can do it. But for practicality purposes, this summer, we're splitting with the county, next summer, we'll offer the course ourselves. Those courses are normally, I think, $300. So are we splitting our revenue with the county, or how we doing?
No. They are just opening up the spots to us, and we're gonna pay their fee to train our lifeguards. The thing about trying to get open is that we need all the lifeguards trained by the end of next weekend. We have 8 people going to their training, but Tyler can teach it, but the guidelines say you have to have a class of 7 yourself. But because all this hiring took place in a week's time, we couldn't plan on Tyler teaching it this
I
year.
wasn't speaking in terms of the next 2 weeks, I was speaking moving forward, because we could offer the class in July, we could offer the class in August. So in that time frame, when we get towards the middle / end of the season, after we're already fully staffed, are we still gonna do that in conjunction with the county, or would we do that ourselves? Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Right, but then he still has to have 7 people
Yeah, I understand.
in order to.
Now, and as a component of the lifeguard class, they're gonna teach CPR, correct?
Yes,
So, is that a separate breakout cost that we can have, or is it like a separate program
it's
fee?
all inclusive. Get their CPR, AED, the whole Red Cross packet is what they're trying.
Because I know that, usually sometime in June or July, the, North Carolina High School Athletic Association has their clinic, their conference. And most of the coaches have to be at least CPR certified. So if now they don't have to be lifeguard certified, but CPR certified, that's what I was asking, if that's something that can be broken out into a separate offering. I know that, a lot of the coaches would rather get it local if they could. Be done in
Oh,
a
you
day.
want the power to break it out.
Right, be done in a day. We could work with the local high schools, and middle schools that have to have coaches that are certified under NCHSAA. As opposed to going to a 3-day clinic that's in Greensboro. Because if you don't work for the school system, and so you're at your regular job, you can't go to that clinic. in Greensboro for 3 days, you just can't.
We
I
often
got,
offer CPR through the fire department as well.
But I mean,
Not single the-
I'm just kind of thinking outside the box, is potential programming, things that we might be able to do, utilize that. So just keep that in mind.
He's also going to get his certification to teach, women instructors, so we can train our own swimming instructors for next year. He will have all the certifications by the end of the office.
We won't repeat this thing.
Oh, no.
I'll probably take, if he's offering it in July or August, I'll probably take get recertified.
You can sign up.
I like to do swimming.
Anybody else think?
I don't like the early swimming, though. Motion to adjourn. Yeah, they, for some reason, it's. Well, I think that's a lot of chicken.